Hi, this is Carl Leops at the University of Arizona. Let's continue our review of the Chapter 12, Comparative Single Subject Research Designs in the Gast text. So now we're going to talk briefly about special issues with comparative designs, and we talked about some killjoy input from a noted researcher about the difficulties with these designs, and they do have some serious difficulties. They have all of the threats to internal validity of any other study. But there are three issues that are really, to which they are really susceptible and that are really problematic, and that is multi-treatment interference, non-reversibility of effects, and separation of treatments. So multi-treatment interference is this issue that one experimental condition has an effect on the performance under another experimental condition. It's almost like history with the first condition affects performance in the next condition. So there are really three types that have been described, where people talk about in general: carryover effects and sequence effects and alternation effects. All right. So carryover effects are the influence of one experimental condition on performance under another condition because of the nature of the characteristics of the first condition. So the effects carry over from the first condition into the second condition. Sequence effects are the influence of one condition over another one based on the ordering of these experimental conditions. Meaning that, let's say you are comparing the best way to teach a person, thinking about the best way to teach, well, we'll go back to reading again, to increase reading speed for a student. You're using repeated readings and great leaps. Sequence effects would suggest that the first condition, repeated readings, the things that you do would affect the second condition, and that if you flip them around, things might be different. Okay, so that the sequence makes a difference. Carryover simply means that based on the conditions in that first setting, or that the characteristics of the initial condition, repeated readings, it would influence the effects under the next condition, which would be great leaps. Then that third type of multi-treatment interference is alternating effects, and that's the effect of rapidly alternating conditions, and that's an odd thing too, because in some of these comparison designs you rapidly alternate conditions, and simply rapidly alternating conditions could be responsible for what you see as an effect. In other words, there's some real issues in terms of how you line up your conditions, right? And some of the designs, the comparative designs, are put together because of that problem, are put together the way they're put together. So you might have an A, B, C, B, A, B, and you have to figure out what order to put your conditions. And you may have multiple students, and you may mix those, so you can say, well, you know what, it wasn't ordering effects, it wasn't sequencing effects, it wasn't, I'm minimizing carryover. We'll look at some of that in a little bit. Non-reversibility of effects is another issue. Big issue in comparison designs. There are designs in which you can compare non-reversible behaviors. So if you are teaching shoe tying, if you are teaching students or clients' ability to locate insurance information, that's the non-reversible kind of thing. And so how could you use some other intervention to help your clients learn to access insurance information if you've already taught them how to access insurance information? I got some great graphs in here to show. So 12.1 makes that fairly clear. Or is that 12? Let's look back at 12.1. 12.2 is what they're looking for. All right. I'm not sure how this graph applies. Let me see. I did have some good graphs showing non-reversibility. Frankly, this is a multi-treatment interference. So this is one of the better graphs. This is the one I really liked, showing that B alone could take you to where you need to go. If you add intervention C, you don't know that you weren't going to get there anyways, right? You're on your way. So you might tell from an A-B design, but when you stack them together, then you get multi-treatment interference. And you may have interference here because of the ordering of B and C. The last thing that you really have to keep in mind, and they make a real point of, is that when you're applying two or more interventions to the same behavior, the ultimate level of the behavior cannot be attributed to a single intervention. Right? So when you look at people doing comparison designs, the ultimate level of the behavior, they would encourage you not to look at that as if the intervention had been done alone, because it has been delivered in conjunction with some other intervention. You may be able to say that one intervention was more successful under those conditions than the other, but you wouldn't be able to say that intervention C will get you to criterion. You don't know that until you use just intervention C instead of intervention B and intervention C. So, in summary, there are some real issues with trying to do comparison designs, but the way that you organize the designs can help you control for that. But overall, comparison designs are a huge headache to run, and they're for folks who really like to be finicky and picky in how they put things together.